we'll have definitive answers within a year, and we'll know, and then we'll be able to eliminate the exposures. And this kind of tsunami of anger against me for making that announcement was almost incomprehensible to me.
We don't usually open our episodes by playing or discussing what we can only describe as disinformation. But in this case, we think it's important because what Robert Kennedy said last week, and again, Robert Kennedy is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, wasn't just wildly offensive, it was dangerously wrong. And now that he is in charge of HHS, his words don't just reflect his own personal ignorance, they reflect policy. But here at Marriage Trump Media, we have an opportunity to combat this disinformation with the one thing the Trump regime never seems to have or care about: facts. So let's start with the most horrifying moment from Kennedy's press conference when he claimed that people with autism, and I apologize in advance for this, cannot live fulfilling lives.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes, they'll never hold a job, they'll never play baseball, they'll never write a poem, they'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
What on earth is that psychopath talking about? He's not describing autism. I mean, okay, there are many, many, many genetic conditions that exist on a spectrum. What he's doing is describing a worst case nightmare scenario. This is a fear-mongering fantasy that absolutely elides the existence of real people who live fulfilled, successful lives with autism. And families of these people are calling out Kennedy. Samantha Taylor, whose 20-year-old son is on the spectrum, told ABC News, quote, "To say that it's an epidemic and destroying families is an insult to everyone in the autism community," unquote. Yes, absolutely. And there's proof of this, not just in our everyday lives, which makes me believe that Kennedy has never interacted with a person with autism about, the people he seems to care so much about. But we see brilliant examples in our mainstream culture. Season 3 of Love on the Spectrum, US, is currently in Netflix's top 10 globally. The show was a profound example, broadcast through one of the largest international streaming platforms available, of just how, I can't even say off the mark, just how fantastical and grotesque Kennedy's comments are. The show follows people with autism navigating dating, careers, and independent living, like all of us do. One of them, Danny, is a lifelong entrepreneur who owns an animation studio. Here she is in News 6 in Knoxville discussing her upcoming keynote address in the city.
The reason why this visit is very important to me is because my company, Disinformation Entertainment, and Autism Breakthrough of Knoxville share the same mission on helping people on the autism spectrum thrive in life by providing similar services, including employment.
Yes, so important. And we're so glad you're here to really bring more focus to this. It's such an important issue. You mentioned your animation company, Danimation. You were only 14 when you formed this company. What inspired you?
What really inspired me to start my animation company is because I look up at one of my heroes, Satoshi Tairiji, the creator of Pokemon, who started his video game company, Game Freak, at age 17. So I set out to beat his record. But in addition to that, he also had a couple of friends of his that helped him get his company started. So I had my aunt and uncle help me get that started. You see, nobody works alone.
Yes, nobody works alone. And that's brilliant. And I think it's extraordinary that she can have the equanimity to make her case. I have no doubt in my mind that she has no problem making her case, but the fact that she's willing to do so under these circumstances, it offends me. But she's able to do it with equanimity that puts Kennedy to shame, because how dare he require people to defend themselves against his grotesque imaginings? The reality is that there are people with autism just like the rest of us. There are some of us who function at an exceptional level. Some of us do just fine. Some of us just get by. We're all human beings. The problem for people like Kennedy is that he has a problem with people who are different from him. If you have a problem with people who are different from you, you're the problem. So let's move on to another dangerous falsehood that Kennedy is spreading and has been spreading for decades. And he took it up again at the same press conference. And that is the myth that autism is preventable. Take a look.
This is a preventable disease. We know it's an environmental exposure. It has to be. Genes do not cause epidemics. They can provide a vulnerability. You need an environmental toxin. We're going to announce a series of new studies to identify precisely what the environmental toxins are that are causing it.
Okay. That guy either needs to be committed or imprisoned because he's a danger to the health of all Americans. What he's spouting there is pseudoscience. The overwhelming medical consensus is that autism is not caused by vaccines or mysterious environmental poisons. It is not an epidemic under any definition of that term. And now, this is true of not just autism. It's true of many other things we've seen in the last few years, like ADD, ADHD, and even some kinds of allergies, right? Experts have largely attributed the steady rise in autism diagnoses to better understanding of and screening for the condition, including a U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report this week that indicated a rising rate of autism, along with, quote, increased access to identification among previously underserved groups, unquote. Also, doctors identifying it earlier, not because there's a greater incidence of it, but because we're finally paying attention. And so that so-called evidence Kennedy is touting that links vaccines to autism, well, the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania uncovered the paper that Kennedy uses to cite this link. And guess what? It's deeply flawed. According to Jeffrey S. Morris, director of the Division of Biostatistics at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine, the paper, quote, has so many severe methodological issues, it clearly should not have passed any legitimate peer review, unquote. Just days after this press conference, Kennedy made an even more shocking claim, if that's even possible. But no matter how much evidence there is disproving his twisted fantasies, Kennedy continues to spout the same dangerous, unthinkably deranged rhetoric. On Sunday, he went on WABC radio and had this to say.
This is an epidemic. It dwarfs the COVID epidemic and the impacts in our country because COVID killed old people. Autism affects children and it affects them at the beginning of their lives, the beginning of their productivity, and it's absolutely debilitating for them, their families, their communities, and for our country. Just the pure economic cost of autism will be by 2035 $1 trillion a year.
Okay. Comparing COVID-19 to autism. first of all, COVID-19 was an epidemic, and it's a communicable disease. Autism has its roots in it's genetic. Okay, you cannot get autism from somebody else who has autism. COVID-19 claimed the lives of over 7 million people globally. 400,000, over a million Americans died from COVID, and over 400,000 of them died because Donald Trump killed them with COVID. You cannot die from autism. That is like not even a thing that exists in this world. So Kennedy doesn't even know the difference between a life-threatening virus that is contagious and a neurodevelopmental condition that's genetic. I have to be honest, between that clip and the first one we played of him, he sounds like a eugenicist to me, quite frankly. That $1 trillion cost a year by 2050, Kennedy offers no source for those numbers that he pulls out of the air. The real numbers? The National Institute of Health has spent more than $300 million researching autism, developing science-backed specifications. That seems reasonable. If Kennedy starts to widen those specifics with his hack theories, Peter Pensis, director of the Center of Autism and Neurodevelopment at Northwestern University, warns that if the criteria are open too much, quote, anybody can get a diagnosis, then you'll get incorrect numbers. Exactly. And I mean, that's what Kennedy wants. He doesn't want to use the data to inform his understanding of autism. He wants to start from his completely insane beliefs about autism and fake the numbers to support it. So this isn't just rhetoric anymore. This is the guy who oversees our health systems, all of them, including things like special education. Under Donald's executive order in March, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which has always been under the Department of Education, is being moved to the Department of Health and Human Services. Wonder why. Well, one, because they're trying to get rid of the Department of Education. And two, now Kennedy is in charge of overseeing public policy for students with disabilities, which should alarm all of us, even those of us who don't have family members who are disabled. There's a catch, though. Only Congress has the authority to move IDEA. And yet, it's happened. It's yet another case of Donald bypassing the Constitution to consolidate power within his regime, within the executive branch, with the complete abdication of the Republicans in Congress, who have once again decided that they do not want their constitutional authority and are willing to hand it over. The ARC, the largest national disability rights group in the country, issued a press release condemning this move. Quote, framing students with disabilities through a medical lens risks stigmatizing, segregating, and isolating them. It undermines decades of progress toward ensuring that students with disabilities are seen and supported as general education students first, unquote. That is exactly what's at stake here. Kennedy is trying to drag us back to some time when autism was something to be hidden, feared, and quote unquote cured, not understood or supported. We can't let this happen. And yet it's happening. And for reasons, well, why aren't people paying closer attention? Because there's too much going on. That's why. And that's part of it. Yeah, Donald is tanking the economy. One, because he's probably getting very wealthy doing that. He's enriching the people who keep him in power, sure. But people are using the chaos he's creating for cover to do the kinds of things that Kennedy's doing. Just as somebody like Pete Hegseth was using the chaos as cover to run the Pentagon like it was his own private club. But at some point, we need to dig our heels in and say, wait a second, what is going on? Why is it happening? And what are we going to do about it? Because right now, our children's futures are at stake. All of them, not just children with autism, not just children with developmental disabilities, not just children with medical illnesses that require research funding for research that's also being put on hold because of people like Robert Kennedy and Elon Musk. All of our children at risk. We can liken this to the situation that's happening with immigration. Some people may not care that people who aren't in this country legally are being denied their due process rights. Well, guess what? You should care, because if one person in this country is denied due process, any of us can be. If children with autism are denied their rights and their full humanity, which is exactly what Robert Kennedy's doing under the guise of pretending he cares, all of our children, I say again, are at risk. Please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.